Welcome to the Family Philanthropy Speaks video blog series from the National Center for Family Philanthropy. These conversations highlight the innovative spirit of family giving. Today we meet Carrie Avery, president of the Durfee Foundation in Los Angeles. Carrie is also active on the leadership team of the Trust-Based Philanthropy Project. We also appreciate that Carrie is a former chair of the board here at NCFP. Carrie is in the third generation of the foundation, but did not grow up expecting to be a part of it and never imagined herself as chair. We started our conversation with Carrie reflecting on her journey and what led her to the unexpected.
I joined the Durfee board when I was in my late 20s, around 26 years old. And at that point, the board was my grandfather, my two uncles, and my mom. And then my older brother and I joined at the same time. Before that, I was I'd gone to college. When I graduated from college, I started a bakery with my then boyfriend, which was not the path that my parents thought I would go on. But I moved to a college town in Indiana from California and owned and operated a bakery, which was really one of the hardest things I've ever done. But it actually went well, and we ended up selling it to somebody. And after that, I went to law school, which was a lot easier than running a bakery. During law school, I volunteered and did pro bono work for a lot of nonprofits. I did internships. I began to see the nonprofit side of the world that we're in, and then worked for a nonprofit after I graduated from law school. So I had that perspective coming into the Durfee board, and I think we've always reached out to our family members when they're more in that age range, in the mid-late 20s, sort of having gone through some of the bumps in the road and the moving around and figuring out your path, and find that they're more ready to engage with us at that point. And when I said that quote, it was really more about, if I'd been groomed, at age 18 to come on, I would have been fine, but I don't think I would have brought as much insight to the board.
Besides formal engagement, were you introduced at an earlier age to the family philanthropy effort, and how?
I really wasn't. I mean, I knew that my mom went to board meetings for the Durfee Foundation with Grandpa, and she didn't talk about it that much. So I've tried. I have two sons who are in their 20s, and as they've been growing up, I've certainly talked about my work a lot more than my mom talked about her board engagement. I haven't tried to get them, on the board before they were ready. It's more like it's there when it's the right time. I want to talk about it because I think my work is interesting, and I want to share it with you. But it's not this sense of active recruitment and inculcation into the Durfee Foundation.
What do you take away as some of the core tenets of what has made your family philanthropy successful? And I would say the inverse, what are some of the challenges that your family has met along the way?
I think the most important thing is that we really come into it with an attitude that being on the Family Foundation board is a privilege and not a right. If you want to join the Durfee Foundation board and you're a family member, you have to go through a year-long process of attending board meetings, going on site visits, sitting on a panel for grant decisions, doing something professional like something at Southern California Grantmakers or Exponent or NCFP, where you sort of learn more about the broader field. So we have a whole program that you have to go through for a year, and at the end of that year, then both the prospective trustee and the board decide if this seems like a good fit. And so that sends a strong message. And as a result, our board is awesome. Our board, we send out a board book, and 2 weeks before a board meeting, and we come into the meeting, I know everybody has read that board book. So I feel like if you set a high bar, people will meet it, and philanthropy deserves that. That it's not just something that you do in your spare time when you feel like you have the time to do it, but it's a real commitment. This year, we're celebrating our 60th anniversary, and I think a lot of the strength of the family participation in the foundation board, we also have non-family members that we'll talk about later, has been because we have a strong sense of what the commitment is and who we are.
What are some of the challenges that you've met along the way?
Right now we have 7 family members and 2 community trustees, non-family members on our board, and everybody does not think exactly alike. But we do try to have unanimous consent on really just about everything that we do. If there are that many objections or concerns about something, then we'll just say, we're going to sit on this for a little while. But we have a lot of respect for each other, and I think there's a lot of respect for the process.
How has that evolved, and are there resources that you've looked to help build in the right process?
We have not really used that many external consultants. We've had a facilitator who has helped us with board retreats, a woman named Robin Kramer, who's awesome. And when we plan a board retreat, the executive director, Claire Peeps, and we spend probably 8 months with Robin Kramer planning this board retreat, which is something that we do every other year in the summer. But in normal times, we spend a huge amount of time planning talking to the board about what are some of the things that are on your mind that you think. So it's a toggling back and forth between our own leadership from being, working on this day to day and checking in with the board. And I think that's part of that. Being in leadership is leading, but also checking, but not getting too far ahead.
So let's talk about trust and the Trust-Based Philanthropy Project.
I'll talk a little bit about Trust-Based Philanthropy just to give a sense of it. So this grew out of a project from the Whitman Institute in San Francisco, and then grew into something bigger that they've always had Whitman always had trust-based principles in their grant making, of being in partnership with their grantees, listening closely. There are a number of principles. People can go to the Trust-Based Philanthropy Project website to get the full rundown. And the one thing that they heard from their grantees often was, can you please share this with other funders? And we want other funders to operate like you. This is something that Durfee has also heard a lot from our grantees as well, is that the way that we do grant making is very much in a deep relationship with the organizations that we fund, and it's much more than an application process and an approval and a check. It's conversations and network building and working with people over the course of usually many years, and oftentimes in the case of we have a sabbatical program for nonprofit leaders that we've been doing since the 90s, and we have an alumni network of over 100 people, executive directors, who've had Durfee sabbaticals, and we hold retreats, we hold lunches, we have events, we connect them with other people, and so people have begun to joke about how like you're in the Durfee family, and that they're just part of it forever. So we've also heard from our grantees about, can you talk to other funders about how to work this way? And I've been so glad to be part of this network of the Trust-Based Philanthropy Project with Headwaters Fund in Montana and the Robert Sterling Clark Foundation in New York, and Thousand Currents, and really trying to spread this model of operating. It's really about examining power relationships in between funders and nonprofits, and the funders recognizing that the nonprofits know a lot more about the subjects that we're funding than we do, and so we should cede our power to their knowledge and operate from a position of trust, as opposed to operating from a position of, the opposite of trust is mistrust or suspicion. And a lot of the time, grant agreements and grant relationships operate out of mistrust or suspicion, that there's, we're giving you this money, but you have to do these 12 things, and you have to report back to us all the time, and you have to give us these certain results, and we're only going to give you money for a year, and then we'll decide if we get to re-up you for the next year. But in the meantime, you can't build your budget or have any certainty about how this relationship is moving forward. And we've just found it to be so much more rewarding to be in deep partnership and commit to the mission of an organization and its leadership, and say, we're going along for the ride, and you know what you're doing, and we're excited to be a part of it, but you know what you're doing. And so we're going to give you general operating support, multi-year, and we'll be in conversation. We don't have onerous reporting requirements. It's more about, just send us your financials that you've already prepared, and we want to have some conversations. We've been practicing trust-based philanthropy, as have many others, for years, and nobody's claiming that this is a new invention. It's just a set of practices that have been given a name, and we launched the project in January. And little did we know that it would become really critical at this time. When March came around, we were like, okay, we've got to loosen a lot of restrictions. We've got to get money out the door. We've got to give people more time and lengthen our grant commitments, and recognizing that they had to, nonprofit leaders were having to make all kinds of huge decisions on very little information in a quick time, only talking to their boards and their staff on Zoom. And, the last thing that they needed was to worry about whether their grant was going to get pulled because they weren't able to do what it was that they agreed that they would do with us. So it's been really gratifying that a lot of funders have turned to trust-based philanthropy and said, "What is this thing? This looks really important." And they're seeing in action how it really operates in these really, really urgent circumstances. But it also begs the question of, if you can change to trust-based philanthropy practices, or at least adopt some of these practices in urgent times, then why go back? COVID was urgent, and people had to pivot and work quickly. But the other issues that our grantees are working with are equally urgent. They're, climate change, childhood hunger, the opioid crisis. Why shouldn't we give the nonprofits the tools to pivot quickly and do what they see needs to be done with the supporting trust of their funders?
It's counter to what a lot of funders know about, making sure you do extensive due diligence and making sure you have accountability, and, that we're driving towards this thing called impact with a lot of strict. If you start to look at the principles of listening and then building in trust, it seems like, it eases some of those tensions. So I'd love for you to talk to some of the precursors to establishing trust by way of actually understanding the needs of those whom you seek to serve.
Listening is absolutely key. And we often say at Durfee that we've never had an original idea in our lives, because everything that we do is in response to what we hear from our grantees. And our sabbatical program came from hearing from executive directors who would say, "I love my work, I love my staff, I love the mission, but I'm feeling so burned out. And the only way that I can see around this is to quit my job, take some time off, and then regroup and do something else. But I don't want to do that because I love my job." And finding and deciding, well, gosh, what if we created a safe space for people to take a break from their job that's well supported and allows them to re-enter their job and supports their staff to grow and change during that time of sabbatical. So that's one example. And then once we started sending people on sabbatical, they say, "Oh, all these other people are getting sabbaticals. I would love to meet that person. That's so cool." And I was like, well, gosh, let's create a network. And then we start connecting people. And so, that's what I recommend, is like, if you keep your ears open and really listen to what people are saying and what they need, then you'll look brilliant, because then you're responding to what they do, and you're in the position to operationalize it. And as far as impact goes, it is about letting go of the sense like that we know so much. We don't know so much. The people on the ground are the ones who know so much. And with our sabbatical program, the impact, we've done studies, we have them on our website, about the long range, huge impact that providing sabbaticals to executive directors have on organizations, their boards, their leadership, and their communities. And so, but it's also about patience. It's like, that doesn't happen immediately necessarily, but it plays out over a long period of time.
When you're identifying a new potential partner, How do you establish that trust?
I'll use one of our other programs as an example. We have our Springboard program that's for newer organizations. Sometimes they're 501c3 nonprofits. Sometimes they're movements or organizations that are not 501c3s. And they apply. They self-identify, so they apply to us, and then we have a conversation. In normal times, we talk to them on the phone. We read their application. We have a phone call with them, and then if that seems like a fit, we'll go out and visit them on site. We don't ask them to come to our office. We want to go see them on their turf. If we say that we're going to be there at 2:00, we are there at 2:00. We're not, we take our commitments really seriously, and we want to send a message that your time is just as important as ours. So there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of telling people, you should talk to these other grantees and see what they think of us. That it's not just us vetting them, they should be vetting us as well, and to find out if we're a good partner.
I'm getting a lot of questions. We collectively are getting a lot of questions around how to incorporate community voices into the boardroom of a family foundation. Do you have any advice on how to do that, and any reflections on your efforts to do that?
I've been on the board for a really long time, and I always wanted to have non-family on the board, but the rest of the family, they had some hesitancy. I did all this research. I talked to a whole bunch of other family foundations. I wrote a big memo about, all of these different family foundations that made that switch, and all of them said, yes, do it. It's a really important and good move for a family foundation, that none of them regretted it. But still, I had my research, and the board was like, yeah, sure, but change is hard. Our executive director had a brilliant idea. She said, how about, this was at our 50th anniversary, so this was 10 years ago. She said, how about if we bring 2 people on, not as trustees, but as board fellows, people who come to our meetings. We want them to see everything, take part, fully participate. We'd had a model at that we've continued, of having one former grantee, usually a sabbatical recipient or a Stanton Fellow, who has been in our network and really understands from the who's currently running a nonprofit, and then somebody from the philanthropy world who works for another foundation or has that connection, so that they can bring that perspective. And so we brought on 2 board fellows, and they were fantastic. And about partway through, I was talking with them about how's this experience going, and they said, and they both said it was great, but one of them said, it feels a little weird not to, I really appreciate it, it's great, it feels a little weird not to be a trustee and not to have a vote. And so I brought that back to the board confidentially and said that, and they said, oh, well, they should just be trustees. And it was just so fast. And I think it was the unknown versus the known. And then as soon as they came in, everybody's like, oh, these people are awesome. This is great. Yes. And ever since then, we've had many iterations of community trustees on our board, and it has been nothing but great, and everybody loves them. And it's just, and they would all, and everybody in the family would say that they add so much to our board, just in terms of perspective. We're also looking for racial diversity, and that's been, it was great. It was great to get us over that unknown. Other family foundations might be more willing to take the leap, but I would highly encourage it. It's really, it's been a huge value add.
We're coming to the end of our time. I want to ask one last question. As we look to the future, what's your hope for giving families and their pursuit of social impact? What's your call to action?
So, I feel like we are at a moment where at our foundation, we are looking at everything, in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're looking at operations, grant making, finance, investments, staffing, everything that we do on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and on trust-based principles. And like I said, the trust-based philanthropy framework has just been so helpful as a way to look at what we do. Is that really trust-based? And so both of those things, those feel like those are huge projects. And daunting, but also exciting, because I feel like we are at this moment of, I'm really just seeing things in a whole new way, and I'm really eager to interrogate with our board everything from, why do we have a credit card with that bank? Our company credit card should be with the Black-owned bank in Los Angeles. How come we never thought about that before? So just things like that. It's a moment of examining every aspect of your operations, and it's scary but also exhilarating.
It is indeed scary, but also exhilarating. Well said. Carrie, thank you. I could talk to you for hours. Thank you for all of your leadership in the sector, and certainly for your leadership of NCFP over the years.
Thank you, Nick.
Take care.